All right, I need to talk to you about something that went down in Cleveland, because I've been chewing on it for a while now and I still can't get over how it played out. A grown man with a microphone and a platform basically dismantled his own credibility, live, in front of people who were already side-eyeing him. And here's the kicker. Nobody did it to him. No ambush, no gotcha, no trap laid in advance. He just kept talking. He kept going and going until his own words turned on him. I'm talking about Jason Lloyd, and I'm talking about the storyline that's been hovering over the entire Browns offseason like a cloud that won't move. Shedeur Sanders. Before I break this whole thing down piece by piece, I want to leave you with a question, because I think it's the one that actually matters here. When a media guy spends weeks building a narrative around a young quarterback, and that narrative starts caving in on itself in real time, who ends up paying for it? Is it the reporter who takes a little heat for a day or two and then just slides into the next hot take like nothing happened? Or is it the player, the one who actually has to live inside that storm, absorbing months of manufactured noise built on absolutely nothing solid? I know where I land on that. I think you will too once we get through this. Here's what keeps happening with this Browns quarterback situation, and it's almost comedic at this point if it weren't so unfair. Every week, there's a fresh face, a fresh angle, a fresh reason why supposedly Shedeur Sanders can't be trusted with this franchise's future. And every single week, the second you actually sit down and check what's behind the claim, it collapses. I've watched this cycle repeat itself over and over with different messengers saying basically the same thing, and at some point you have to stop and ask yourself, is this really about the player? Or is this about engagement, about clicks, about how much traffic you can generate by slapping controversy onto one of the most talked about names in the sport right now? I already know my answer. So let's rebuild exactly what happened here, step by step, because once you lay it out in order, you realize just how hollow this whole move on from Shedeur argument actually is. It starts with a complete flip-flop, not a slight shift in tone, a full 180, and it happened inside a single news cycle. One moment, Jason Lloyd is dead certain. He's practically yelling that Cleveland should have traded Shedeur away months ago, that there was no logical reason to keep him on the roster, that the front office dropped the ball by not moving him already. Confident. Loud. The kind of statement built specifically to get clipped and shared everywhere. And then, almost before the dust settles, that same guy is telling a completely different story. Suddenly there's no trade market. Suddenly nobody in the league wants him. Suddenly the exact idea he was shouting about less than 24 hours earlier doesn't even make sense to bring up anymore. Sit with that for a second, because this isn't some small inconsistency you can wave away. This is a full reversal. You cannot claim a guy needs to be shipped out immediately, and then, practically in the same breath, admit that not a single team would actually want him. Those two positions can't both be true. One of them was never real to begin with. It was a take built to generate noise, not one built on anything resembling actual reporting, and that's exactly the moment it got called out. No delay, no softening the blow. When an argument falls apart that fast, under its own weight, it was never analysis in the first place. It was noise wearing the costume of insight, and everybody watching could see right through the seams. Then there's the locker room excuse, and honestly, this is where it starts feeling less like reporting and more like scrambling. Jason Lloyd pivots to this idea that the whole Shedeur situation has somehow infected the locker room, that professional NFL athletes are sitting around distracted, scrolling headlines instead of focusing on their actual jobs. I don't know about you, but I've never bought the idea that an NFL locker room revolves around what one media personality says on a random Tuesday. These are professionals with film to break down, installs to memorize, a season bearing down on them. Suggesting an entire roster is quietly unraveling because of outside commentary isn't just unproven, it's honestly a little insulting to the players themselves. And that excuse got picked apart too, methodically, without any shouting or theatrics, just logic laid out plainly. Why would an entire locker room build its internal culture around one outside voice's opinion? Why would grown men who fought their way onto an NFL roster care that much about what a reporter thinks of a young quarterback? It doesn't hold up under any scrutiny because there was nothing real underneath it to begin with. This is the oldest move in the book when a reporter runs dry on substance. You manufacture a storyline nobody can actually fact-check, you pin it on the players, and you hope the audience is too distracted by the drama to ask for proof. Meanwhile, what has Shedeur actually been doing this entire time? Showing up, putting in the work, staying quiet and letting his performance answer every accusation instead of firing back at every single narrative thrown at him. That contrast alone tells you everything. One side is manufacturing chaos from nothing. The other side is just trying to compete and get better. And that's the part I think gets lost in all this noise. We're talking about a young player who, by every account coming out of that building, has handled an incredibly difficult stretch with more composure than plenty of established veterans could manage. No blow-ups, no social media meltdowns, no shots fired at the coaching staff or the front office. Just quiet, consistent work, week after week, while a rotating cast of outside voices tries to construct a career-ending storyline out of thin air. If the roles were flipped, if it was a reporter's own job security getting picked apart this relentlessly with this little actual evidence, I doubt they'd handle it with anywhere near that same grace. And then there's the moment that's honestly stuck with me the most, the visual of it. The camera kept catching Jason Lloyd's face in that segment, and body language has a way of exposing things words try to cover up. When someone gets caught contradicting themselves live, on camera, you can see it happen in real time. The posture changes, the eyes shift, the confidence that was there 30 seconds prior just evaporates. That's not the look of a man standing on solid ground. That's the look of someone realizing, mid-sentence, that he's been caught with no clean way to backpedal out of it. Shedeur isn't the one generating chaos in Cleveland right now. Jason Lloyd is one shaky, contradictory claim at a time. And he got met with exactly what this situation has needed for a while now. Real pushback, grounded in logic instead of vibes. Now here's where things get even more interesting, because the conversation didn't stop at the trade contradiction. It shifted into an entirely different kind of scare tactic. The direct question got asked. What, specifically, is the problem with Shedeur being a backup quarterback? Not a starter. Not the week one guy. Just a backup. And instead of giving any kind of concrete answer, Jason Lloyd retreats into vague, ominous language. He starts referencing everything that happened last year, as if it's some unspeakable catastrophe everyone should already understand without further explanation. Except here's the problem. Nobody can actually name what that catastrophe was supposed to be, because it never happened. Think about what Shedeur actually went through during his rookie season. Limited playing time, constant scrutiny under a microscope, every small mistake, real or imagined, publicly dissected by grown men holding microphones for a living. And through all of it, what did he actually do? He stayed composed. He didn't lash out at anybody. He didn't demand a trade out of the building. He didn't torch the organization in a single interview. Plenty of players, faced with that level of public dissection while barely getting on the field, would have said something they'd regret later. He didn't. He absorbed it all and kept grinding. So when someone gets asked directly, what actually happened last year that makes this a real problem? And all they can offer back is more vague hand-waving that tells you everything about the foundation this argument was built on. Fear, not fact. If you're going to construct an entire narrative around some mysterious meltdown from a previous season, you need to be able to name it specifically. You need receipts. There weren't any. It sounded a lot more like recycled talking points borrowed from other national voices than an honest, independent assessment. And this is where the whole thing gets flipped completely on its head, because eventually, almost by accident, Jason Lloyd admits something that guts his own argument from the inside. He concedes that the actual issue was never really about Shedeur's play or his behavior or anything he'd actually done. It was about the noise surrounding him. Read that back if you need to, because it's basically a confession. The problem was never the player. The problem was the media circus that reporters like Jason Lloyd helped build in the first place. You can't fairly criticize a young quarterback for staying calm and professional while an entire ecosystem of commentary treats every week of his career like a season of reality television. That's not on him. That's on the people generating the noise in the first place. Now let's talk about what's actually being said inside that locker room, because this is where the gap between perception and reality becomes impossible to ignore. Go ask the teammates, not reporters, not talking heads sitting behind a desk, the actual guys who share a building with him every single day. Tyson Campbell has spoken about him glowingly. Denzel Boston and the rest of the younger core have made it clear they respect him. And through all this noise, all these hot takes, all this speculation, you cannot find one single teammate who stepped up and called him a distraction. Not one. That consistency, that quiet, repeated positive testimony, speaks louder than any outside narrative ever could. Now compare that to the people generating the criticism, people who've never sat inside a quarterback room, never had to process a disguised blitz package in real time with 50,000 fans screaming in their ear. Todd Monken, the actual head coach, the man who evaluates this young quarterback's preparation and performance every single day, calls him a worker. That's not some throwaway compliment tossed out for good PR. Coaches don't hand that label out freely, especially not to someone they view as a problem. That word gets earned through extra film sessions, through additional reps, through showing up on the days nobody's watching. And then there's the off-season detail that, to me, says more than almost anything else in this entire saga. While other quarterbacks in that room scattered elsewhere for the offseason, Shedeur stayed in Cleveland. He was in the building, putting in extra work he technically didn't have to put in. Meanwhile, other players in that same quarterback room were out of the country, treating the offseason more like a vacation than preparation for the most important stretch of their careers. I'm not going to pretend that distinction doesn't matter, because it absolutely does. When your job security and your entire career trajectory are hanging in the balance, how you spend that offseason tells the world exactly how seriously you're taking the moment. One approach treats it like a business trip, with the stakes cranked all the way up. The other treats it like a vacation with a football, stapled onto the itinerary as an afterthought. And then, once he actually started getting real reps with that offense, something shifted. The energy changed. The whole operation looked sharper, more in sync. That's not luck, and it's not a coincidence. That's what happens when a player takes the moment more seriously than everyone else around him, and eventually, that shows up on the field in ways that can't be faked or spun. Really think about the optics of that split screen for a second. On one side, a quarterback treating a make-or-break offseason like a business trip, grinding through extra throwing sessions, building chemistry with receivers who weren't even required to show up yet. On the other side, teammates scattered across different continents, treating the most critical stretch of preparation like a well-earned vacation. I'm not saying rest doesn't matter. Everybody needs a break at some point. But when your roster spot is genuinely uncertain, when the noise around your position is this loud, how you spend those months says something real about where your priorities actually sit. There's also this narrative floating around that Shedeur has somehow become a problem because of what fans post online, because of the temperature of the discourse surrounding him on social media. And I have to push back on that one hard, because that's not on him either. You don't release a player, you don't push someone out of a franchise because strangers on the internet got a little too heated. That's not how a professional organization is supposed to operate. And honestly, it shouldn't even need to be said out loud. If the actual complaint boils down to, "I don't love what people are tweeting," that's a commentary on the internet's behavior, not the player's conduct. What's genuinely telling is who the players actually go to inside that building. Shedeur is reportedly the one guy on that roster teammates gravitate toward, the one they actually talk to, not the veteran with the resume, not the other young quarterback competing for reps. Him. That's not something you can manufacture through a PR team. That's organic respect, earned through daily interaction, and it's about as strong a signal of locker room standing as you're ever going to find. And here's something worth sitting with for a second. None of this is actually new. Shedeur was steady with his teammates as a rookie. He's steady with them now in year 2. This has been consistent the entire time he's been in that building. So why does it keep getting reframed like breaking news? Why does it feel like a fresh controversy every single week when the underlying reality hasn't shifted at all? Because the story was never really about the locker room in the first place. It was about outside noise getting repackaged and sold to an audience as an internal crisis that doesn't actually exist. Then Jason Lloyd doubles down again, this time going straight at Shedeur's football IQ. The claim is that he doesn't know how to properly study film, that he doesn't fully grasp coverages, that he struggles to get the ball out on time. And once again, I have to ask the same obvious question. Where's the evidence? Where's a coach's quote, a statistic, literally anything concrete backing this up? Because it doesn't exist. It's another accusation thrown out to sound sharp on camera with absolutely nothing behind it. Meanwhile, the actual coach who sits in those film rooms every single day, breaking down coverages and adjusting game plans alongside him, calls him a worker. Teammates seek him out for guidance on a regular basis, but somehow we're supposed to believe he can't read a defense. At some point, you have to flip the question around. Has Jason Lloyd ever actually sat in a quarterback meeting? Has he ever had to process a disguised coverage with the play clock bleeding down and a stadium full of noise screaming in his ears? No. He's watching from a press box, typing out a hot take, and calling it expertise. Shedeur is in those meetings every single day, doing the actual work that builds real understanding of the position. So here's where all of this lands for me, and I think it's worth saying plainly. You've got teammates who trust him, who go to him, who talk about him with genuine respect. You've got a head coach who praises his work ethic without any hedging whatsoever. You've got an offseason where he flat out outworked the rest of his own quarterback room. And on the other side of that scale, you've got a handful of media voices trying to construct a narrative that keeps collapsing every single time it gets tested with a real, direct question. Jason Lloyd walked into that segment trying to build a case for moving on from Shedeur Sanders, and instead he walked out with his own credibility in pieces, exposed by contradictions he created himself and questions he simply couldn't answer. The gap between what's actually happening inside that building and what's being sold to the public keeps getting wider, and it's getting harder and harder to ignore. Every week there's a new voice trying to reopen a case that the people closest to the situation, the coaches, the teammates, the ones actually living it day to day, have already settled through their own actions. And every week, that voice runs into the exact same wall. No proof, no quotes, no receipts, just recycled fear dressed up to look like insight. This story out of Cleveland is far from finished. And honestly, if walking through this with me gave you a clearer picture of what's actually going on beneath all the noise, that tells me something. The receipts speak louder than the takes ever will. I'll be keeping an eye on this one closely because once the season actually kicks off, all of this noise either gets buried under real results on the field or it gets louder than ever. Either way, I'll be right here breaking it down for you when it happens.